Hey guys, Mr. Yeisley here. So we're on to lesson number 19 in chapter 4, all about writing linear functions. And in lesson number 19, we're going to talk further and do an example about lines of fit. And as we talked about with a line of fit, is it's a line that closely represents what's going on with your scatter plot and kind of gives you an idea of how to predict future things that might happen based on the data that they've given you, all of that information. And so we talked about 4 things that we have to do in order to figure out a line of fit to model our data. Is first, we need to make a scatter plot of the data if they didn't give that to us. Second, decide if there's a correlation. So is there a positive or negative correlation? Third, draw a line of fit based on that correlation. And as we talked about with the line of fit, if we can get through 2 points, that would be awesome. But we need to have similar amounts of points above and below, right? That above and below that line. And remember, when you draw your line, you need to use a ruler, right? Once we've drawn our line, then we can go in and write the equation of that line of fit. Again, using the 2 points on the line that we figured out, right, to find the slope through the slope formula, and then plugging that slope as well as one of the points into the point slope form and solving it down to get the equation of the line. All right, so let's take a look. That was a quick synopsis of what we talked about in lesson number 18. Let's take a look at example A. And example A says, the table shows the weekly sales of a DVD and the number of weeks since its release. So how many DVDs are you selling every week, as well as how many weeks has it been out there? They want us to write an equation that models the DVD sales as a function of the number of weeks since its release. Right? This sounds really complicated, but it's really not that complicated. What they're really wanting us to do is they're wanting us to figure out a line of fit. All right? The equation of that models this is going to be the line of fit. So when we're talking about this, and I'm just going to draw a little line up here, we're talking about line of fit. Right? So this is that process, those 4 steps that we need to go through. Right? After we've done that, they want us to interpret the slope. So that's just simply saying, hey, what's going on? What is the slope? What's going on with it? And the y-intercept of the line. So we can figure out the y-intercept based on the equation of the line that we figured out for the line of fit, right? And so that's really all we're talking about within that. So as we said, the first thing we need to do is we need to graph this and create the scatter plot of the data they gave us. So remember, this data says this is the weeks it's been out, so 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, so on and so forth. And this is how many sales, and they're saying that it's in millions, all right, that it's had. So in the first week, it had 19 million in sales. In second week, 15 million, so on and so forth. So remember, these are relationships to each other, the amount of weeks, the sales, all right? So we've got order pairs here. So my first order pair is 1, 19. Second is 2, 15. Third is 3, 13. Fourth, 4, 11. Fifth, 5, 10. Sixth, 6, 8. 7, 7, and 8, 5. So there are my order pairs. So that means now I need to go in and I need to graph this information. Right? Well, to graph it, I notice that all the x values as well as all the y values are all positive numbers. So I'm going to be working in that quadrant 1 graph. I also notice that the x values count by 1s and the y values, they don't get any bigger than 20. So I know that I can fit these all on my lines. I don't need to do one of those crazy little signs to show that I'm skipping numbers to start with. All right? So I'm just going to have a nice value, and I'm going to label this is my x value, this is my y value. All right, and then the next thing I need to do is label what I'm counting by. So 0 is the starting point there. And then on the x's, they all count by 1, so I'm going to label by 1s. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The sales goes up to 20, so I can't label by 1s. I know that I don't have enough lines, so I'm going to label by 2s on the y-axis. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26. And then let me move this up because I know I just realized you can't see the x-axis. All right, there we go. All right, then remember, because this is specific data, we need to label each axis and what it's talking about. So remember, the x-axis is talking about weeks, or the week it's on. And then the y-axis is talking about the sales. And remember, these numbers look small, but they're really talking about in millions. So I need to label that as well. So sales in millions. All right, and then last thing I need to do to complete this is graph the actual points. So 119 is my first point. So I'm going to go right 1 on the x and then up to 19. Now that point is not directly labeled, but I know it is in the middle of 20 and 18. So right there's my first point. 2, 15, so right 2 and up to 15. Same thing happened, not on a line directly, but in the middle of 14 and 16. 3, 13, same thing happening again. 4, 11, right 4 up to 11. Same thing, haven't hit a line yet for the y, but that's okay. 5, 10, right 5 and up to 10. There's my first line on the y-axis that I hit evenly. 6, 8, so right 6 and up to 8. 7, 7, so right 7 up to 7. And 8, 5, right 8 and up 5. All right, so now I've got all of my points labeled. So now my next step, once I've got that, is to decide, is there a correlation? Well, as I look at this graph, I'm noticing that as my x is increasing, my y's are beginning to decrease. They're getting smaller and smaller. So when x increases and y decreases, that tells me that I have a negative correlation going on. So there is a negative correlation taking place. So that just helps me when it comes to my line of fit, because I know that my line of fit then is going to go this way. It's going to start here and it's going to trend downward and downward that direction. Right? So that's just some information to help us figure out line of fit. Now, as I look at this, what I want to do in order to find the best way to draw my line of fit, because that's my next step, is to draw my line of fit now that I know it has negative correlation, is I want to kind of take my ruler and place it on here and kind of see, can I match up some points that are in line, right, where I have a similar amount above and below. And so as I look at this, I see these two look kind of close, but I don't have anything below them then, they're all above, right? I notice that, hey, these 2 points are kind of close. So when I look at that, I see that, hey, that leaves me with about 3 lines. I don't know if you can see that. Yep, 3 points that are below it, and then also about 3 points that are above it when I go through those 2 lines. So that would be 2 good points to draw our line of fit through. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to line that up right there. And so then I want to draw my line, so I'm going to draw my line here. And I've drawn my line of fit. And again, I've got 3 here below, 3 above, and 2 that I'm going through, which is ideal. Right? Now, what I have to remember with my line of fit is a DVD can never be less than 0 weeks old. There's always a starting point. So there's not going to be an arrow at this end. But this does continue on this way because it's going to continue to get older and older on the X. It's going to get to 11 weeks, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, and that's okay. All right? That's all right there. So then when I go to use this line of fit, right, it worked out really well. I had 3 below, 3 above, and 2 directly on the line. So what I want to do next is, now that I've drawn my line of fit, it's got similar points above and below, and actually 2 directly on it, I want to use that information. And the first thing I want to do is I want to find the slope of this line. Well, in order to find the slope of the line, I want to use my slope formula. So as I look at this, I say, okay, slope formula, there's 2 points on the line. What are those ordered pairs of that line? Well, this one is 5, 10, and this one is 6, 8. So I'm going to label those, and I'm going to call this one X1 and Y1, X2 and Y2. And then I'm going to plug that information in, and I'm going to solve for the slope. So I'm going to say m equals y2, which is 8, minus y1, which is 10. Make sure this is on that picture. Yep, okay, good. Over x2, which is 6, minus x1, which is 5. So I've got on the top 8 minus 10, which is negative 2. And then on the bottom, I've got 6 minus 5, which is 1. And negative 2 over 1 is the same as just negative 2. So my slope is negative 2 on this line of fit. So then once I've got that information, I now have slope. I've got a point on the line. Actually, I have 2, but I only need to use 1. And I can plug that into my point slope form of y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I'm going to do that. So again, I'm using this y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And I'm going to plug the information in that I have. I have m. That's negative 2, so I'm going to plug that in. I have an x1 and a y1, so I can plug that in. So y minus y1 was 10, equal to m, which is negative 2, times x minus x1, which was 5. And so now I can solve this down to get the equation of the line, right? Which is what they've asked me for. So first thing, distribute the negative 2. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. And then that's equal to y minus 10, which I didn't use. Well, now I need to get the y by itself. So to get rid of the negative 10, I'm going to add 10 to both sides. And when I do that, those disappear. I'm left with just the y, and that is equal to negative 2x, and then plus positive 10 plus 10 is positive 20. So y equals negative 2x plus 20 is the equation of my line of fit. Now, if I just wanted to think about that and make sure that makes sense, slope, right, says was negative 2. We figured that out, right? If I started at the point on the line and I said, all right, move towards the right, I'm going to go down what is 2 spots and then right 1, so negative 2 would be correct, right? Also, this represents the y-intercept. Well, if I go look at my line, look at that. It hit the y-axis right at 20. So that equation of that line of fit is correct. Now, the last piece of information that they've asked us for is to interpret the slope and the y-intercept of the line of fit. Right? Well, when it comes to interpreting the slope, what is the slope? Well, the slope is negative 2. So I would say the slope is negative 2, which tells me, well, what does that tell me? All right. Well, it tells me that as the DVD is getting older, it's been out longer, the sales are decreasing, right? Not as many are being bought. So what I would say is the slope is negative 2, which tells me, or I would say, which means for every week the DVD is out, the sales are decreasing, and they're decreasing by about negative 2. Or remember, that deals with millions. So I would say the sales are decreasing by 2 million. And that's how I'm interpreting my slope. And that's what the line of fit's telling me. Right? The other thing that I need to interpret, they asked me, was the y-intercept. Now, the y-intercept was 20, we found, right? And that happened at 0 weeks. So that says that, hey, the y-intercept is 20, so you've sold 20 million copies before it's even been released. Well, that doesn't make any sense when you think about it, right? How could you sell 20 million copies of something that hasn't been released? So when it comes to interpreting y-intercepts, what you're really, of a line of fit especially, what you're really trying to determine is, does it even make sense? Does it have relevance to what's going on? And so I would say for this that it has no relevance, because you can't sell 20 million of something that hasn't been released out to the public to be sold. So I would say something along the lines of the y-intercept is 20, but that has no relevance because you can't sell something that hasn't been released. You can't have sales, I should say, would probably be a better way to say it. You can't have sales of something that hasn't been released. And so when they ask you to interpret things, you're really just reading into what does it actually mean? Does it actually make sense? So the slope made sense for it, right? Which is true, right? Because about every week it was out, it was decreasing by about 2 million. Not always. Like the first week to the second week, there was a pretty big drop. But then after that, it was fairly steadily at about 2 million and drop, right? There was a couple 1 million weeks in there, and that's fine, right? But typically, it was dropping by about 2 million in sales for every week it was out. The y-intercept, where it started up here, that doesn't make any sense because you can't sell something that hasn't been released yet. So that really had no meaning for us. All right, well, if you have additional questions about this, please let me know. I apologize, that wasn't all the way up so you couldn't read all my writing, but hopefully you heard what I said. But again, if you have additional questions on how these lines of fits work, please let me know. Otherwise, you should have what you need to continue on in the chapter.